The rain had just begun to fall when Emma Whitaker pulled her car into the driveway of her new home. A two-story colonial house tucked at the edge of Hawthorne Hollow, a sleepy New England town with more trees than people. The moving truck had left hours ago, but she hadn't bothered unpacking. She just sat there in the car for a while, gripping the steering wheel, trying to convince herself this wasn't a mistake. After the breakup with Daniel, she needed a new start. Not just a new apartment or a fresh hairstyle. Something bigger. Something that felt like completely erasing her old self. That's why she jumped on the listing for the old Bradbury house. Despite the creaking floorboards and the overgrown backyard. It was cheap, suspiciously cheap. But she told herself it was a fixer-upper with character. As she stepped inside, her boots echoing against the hardwood floor, she paused to take it all in. The air inside had a stillness like a room that had been holding its breath for too long. Dust floated through the sunbeams spilling from the high windows, and the smell of old wood and dried flowers clung to every corner. "This is it," she whispered. "Home." She began settling in over the next few days. Her paintings, bold abstracts she once sold in Boston galleries, were still wrapped in brown paper. Canvases stood stacked in the corner of the living room like forgotten promises. Her studio was meant to be upstairs in a wide attic with slanted ceilings and a view of the woods behind the house. The townspeople were friendly if a bit cautious. A middle-aged woman at the diner called the house cursed under her breath when she thought Emma wasn't listening. A teenage girl at the grocery store giggled when Emma gave her address, muttering something about ghosts and sad endings. Emma rolled her eyes, chalking it up to small-town folklore. Still, at night, when the wind howled through the trees and tapped against the windows like impatient fingers, she couldn't help but feel watched. One morning, she wandered into the attic for the first time. The stairs creaked like they were protesting each step, and when she opened the door, a strange chill kissed her skin. But the light was good, almost golden, and she decided this would be the perfect place to create again. She spent hours up there, brushing off cobwebs, setting up her easel, unpacking her brushes. The longer she stayed, the more she started feeling like herself again. The Emma who painted until sunrise. The Emma who found stories in color. But things started to shift. Small things at first. A light bulb flickered every time she entered the upstairs hallway. Her phone refused to hold a charge in the attic, even when plugged in. She heard scratching in the walls at night. Once, she could have sworn she heard her name spoken. So softly it might have been the wind. It didn't scare her, not at first. If anything, it added intrigue to the house. Maybe there was a story here she could paint. Maybe this eerie silence, this emptiness, would be the key to unlocking her creativity again. One night, she found herself sitting alone in the living room, wrapped in a wool blanket, staring into the cold fireplace. The house creaked around her. The wind sighed through the trees. Then she heard it again. "Emma," she froze. The voice was faint, like it was coming from behind the walls. Female, delicate, almost sad. She stood, heart racing, and walked slowly to the base of the attic stairs. "Who's there?" she whispered into the darkness. "Nothing. Only silence." Then the bulb above her head flickered once, twice, and went out. She chuckled nervously and turned back to the living room, telling herself it was nothing. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe her mind was still healing. But deep down, something unsettled had begun to grow inside her. Something that would soon become undeniable. And so it began, the quiet haunting of Emma Whitaker. It was just past midnight when Emma sat bolt upright in bed, her heart pounding. A sound, a whisper again, too soft to make out, had tugged her out of sleep. She listened in the dark, the faint patter of rain on the roof the only sound at first. Then she heard it again. "Emma," she threw the covers aside and stepped into the hallway, gripping her phone for light. Her screen glowed weakly, barely cutting through the shadows. She tiptoed toward the attic stairs, not knowing why. Her breath was shaky. Every instinct told her to go back to bed, to lock the door and pretend it was just a dream. But something, curiosity, recklessness, or maybe loneliness, pulled her forward. "Who's there?" she called again, her voice firmer this time. No reply. Only a draft brushing her bare arms. Emma shook her head and turned away, trying to laugh it off. "Get a grip," she muttered. "It's just an old house. They make noise. They creak. That's all." But the next day, more oddities began to surface. In the morning, she found her bedroom window wide open, even though she was sure she had locked it. Her mug of tea, which she'd left on the kitchen counter, had been moved to the windowsill. Her keys vanished for hours and were later found in the attic on the floor next to her easel. She tried to dismiss it as her own forgetfulness. Moving stress, perhaps? But deep down, a new fear had started to take root. That evening, she invited her new friend Carla, the librarian from the local town archives, over for coffee. They had bonded over their shared love of obscure authors and weird local legends. "This house is old," Carla said casually, stirring her tea. "Dates back to the 1850s. Changed hands a lot. Never stayed with one owner for more than a few years." "Why?" Emma asked. Carla hesitated. "People said it was cursed. Haunted even." Emma raised an eyebrow. "You don't seem like the superstitious type." "I'm not," Carla admitted, "but I also believe energy lingers in places like this. Especially when something tragic happens." Emma didn't respond. Instead, she looked up at the ceiling where faint creaks echoed above them, slow, deliberate footsteps. Carla looked too, her face pale. "You have rats?" she asked. "I thought so," Emma replied, though her voice was unsure. Later that night, Emma returned to the attic to paint. She felt calm up there, like time slowed down, like she could finally breathe. She dipped her brush into deep blue paint and lost herself in the motion. As she worked, she hummed a tune she barely remembered learning as a child. Then she heard it again. The whisper. Clearer this time. Closer. "Emma." She froze, brush mid-stroke. Slowly, she turned. There was nothing there. Just her canvases and the window, which was slightly ajar. She closed it quickly and looked around. Her pulse raced, but again there was no sign of anyone. And then, impulsively, she whispered into the silence, "What do you want?" The air seemed to still. A sudden, deep cold surrounded her. Her breath came out in mist. A soft reply came barely above the breeze. "To be heard." Emma stumbled back, knocking over a jar of brushes. The voice hadn't come from behind her. It had come from inside the room. "Who are you?" she asked. Silence. She waited, heart thundering in her chest, but there was no more response. Just the creaking of the house and the distant sound of the wind. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to every groan and whisper the house made. She had spoken to something. Something not alive. And it had spoken back. Emma didn't go back up to the attic for 2 days. She kept herself busy rearranging furniture, organizing the kitchen, and scrolling aimlessly through her phone. But no matter how much she tried to distract herself, the memory of the voice, soft, wistful, undeniably real, clung to her like a chill in her bones. By the third night, the dreams began. They started subtly. Flickering candlelight, a soft piano melody, glimpses of a woman in a long, tattered dress standing at the top of the stairs. Emma would wake with the echo of footsteps in her ears, and a heart that beat like she'd just run for her life. She couldn't ignore it anymore. On the fourth night, after pouring herself a glass of red wine and wrapping a thick cardigan around her shoulders, she climbed to the attic with deliberate steps. She turned on the small lamp beside her easel, bathing the room in a warm glow. Felt calmer tonight, almost welcoming. "Okay," she said aloud. "I'm listening." The air shifted. It began with a breeze, even though the windows were closed. The lamp flickered, and the scent of roses, faint but unmistakable, drifted through the room. Then she saw her. Standing by the window was a woman, pale, ethereal, dressed in a Victorian-style gown with lace at the cuffs. Her long dark hair flowed past her waist, and her eyes, sunken yet striking, held centuries of sorrow. Emma gasped and staggered backward, knocking into a table. What are you?" "I'm Lillian," the ghost said softly. Her voice was the same one that had whispered Emma's name. "I lived here. Long ago." Emma's hands trembled, but she didn't run. Some strange part of her felt rooted in place. "You're a ghost." Lillian gave a gentle smile, sad but not frightening. "A memory. A shadow. Call it what you will." They stood there for a long moment, the quiet buzzing between them more unsettling than the specter itself. "Why are you here?" Emma asked. "I never left," Lillian replied. "This was my home. It still is in ways. But no one ever listens. No one sees me." Emma didn't know what to say. This defied everything she believed. Yet here she was, speaking to a ghost. And not screaming, not running, not calling a priest. "How did you die?" she asked before she could stop herself. Lillian turned her head toward the attic window. "I was betrayed," she whispered, "by someone I loved. My heart broke before my body did." Emma sat down slowly on a nearby stool. "And now you're stuck?" "Perhaps," Lillian said. Perhaps I just need someone to understand. In the days that followed, Lillian would appear again and again. Sometimes in the attic, sometimes in reflections, sometimes just a whisper while Emma painted. She told stories, fragments of memories, blurry like old photographs. She spoke of dances in candlelit ballrooms, forbidden romances, and a sister who vanished under mysterious circumstances. Emma found herself captivated. She began painting again, obsessively. The canvases were darker than before, full of shadowy figures and haunted eyes. She called them her memory portraits, and they sold online faster than she could finish them. Lillian became her muse, her confidant. Emma told her about Daniel, the breakup, her fears of being unlovable. Lillian always listened with that same sorrowful gaze. "You're not alone," Lillian said once. "You just needed someone to see you." Emma nodded, the ghost's presence comforting in a way that surprised her. But there were signs, small, easy to ignore at first, that something wasn't quite right. One morning, Emma found one of her self-portraits altered. Her painted face had changed, her eyes hollow, her mouth sewn shut. She hadn't done it. Another night, she woke up with scratches on her arm. Faint, but deliberate. She tried to brush it off as sleepwalking. When she asked Lillian, the ghost smiled and said, "Sometimes pain helps us remember who we are." Still, Emma didn't question her. Not yet. Because she had never felt more inspired, more connected, more seen. She didn't know it yet, but this bond, this strange, growing attachment, was only the beginning of something far darker than she could imagine. Emma's life began to revolve around Lillian. Each morning she would wake up, make coffee, and go straight to the attic as if drawn by a tether. The sunlight would pour in through the windows, but the room always seemed slightly dim, as if it belonged to another time. And always, without fail, Lillian would appear. The ghost no longer startled her. In fact, Emma had come to anticipate her visits. Sometimes she would ask questions, sometimes just sit silently and listen. Lillian had become more than a ghost, she was a friend. A presence. A comfort Emma had longed for since her life unraveled. Lillian told her stories in pieces as though unspooling a forgotten past. She had been the daughter of a wealthy merchant in the mid-1800s. Intelligent, sensitive, and wildly in love with a man her father disapproved of. She had planned to elope with him, until she discovered he had betrayed her with her own sister. "He lied to both of us," Lillian had said, her voice brittle. "He made me believe I was everything to him. And then he left, just vanished. No note, no goodbye. I think it broke something in me." Emma felt a sting of recognition in that tale. Daniel had left her with similar wounds. No explanation, just distance and silence. It was like listening to a mirror image of her own heartbreak. The overlap deepened their bond. "I'm so sorry," Emma said once. "You didn't deserve that." "No one does," Lillian replied. "But pain has a way of etching us permanently." Emma found herself painting more than ever. Lillian became the subject of almost every canvas. Her face haunting and beautiful, her dress flowing like mist, her eyes full of mourning. People online raved about the emotional power of the art, calling it soulful and otherworldly. One night, Lillian lingered longer than usual. The room was unusually cold, and Emma could see her breath as she painted. "You shouldn't trust people so easily," Lillian said, watching her closely. Emma looked up from her canvas. "What do you mean?" "Your friend, Carla. She's been digging into my story." "She's a librarian," Emma said with a small laugh. "That's what she does." "She thinks I'm dangerous," Lillian whispered, moving closer. "She wants to erase me." Emma frowned. "Carla's just protective. She doesn't understand you." "She never will," Lillian snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "They never do." The room grew darker. The edges of the attic seemed to pulse, like the house itself was holding its breath. Emma froze. Then, just as quickly as the anger came, it vanished. Lillian softened again, stepping back into the dimness. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. I don't want to lose you too." Emma tried to brush it off. Maybe Lillian was just afraid. After all, she'd been alone for over a century. That kind of isolation must distort everything. But things continued to shift. Lillian started appearing outside the attic, once in the mirror behind Emma in the bathroom, another time reflected in a puddle on the floor. Emma heard footsteps following her through the halls. Lights flickered every time someone mentioned Carla. And when Carla invited Emma out for coffee, Lillian's voice echoed in her head, "She doesn't care about you. She wants to take you away from me." Emma declined the invitation. She began sleeping less, painting more. Her dreams were consumed by Lillian's memories, screams in the night, the sound of shattering glass, the smell of smoke. One night, she woke up to find a message written in the dust on her attic floor. "Stay with me." She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination or maybe a prank played by her own subconscious. But a small voice inside her whispered the truth. She had crossed some invisible line. Lillian was no longer just a ghost. She was something more. Something possessive. And Emma? She was starting to forget what her life looked like before Lillian. What had once felt like comfort now had the faint scent of entrapment. But she wasn't ready to admit it yet. Not until it was too late. Emma hadn't left the house in a week. She barely noticed the passing days. Her world was narrowed to the attic, her paintings, and Lillian. The ghost had become a constant in her life, more familiar than her own reflection. They spoke for hours, sometimes about the past, sometimes about Emma's deepest fears and dreams. But underneath the surface, something had shifted. Lillian was changing. She grew colder, more watchful, possessive. If Emma mentioned anyone outside the house, Lillian would grow tense, her tone clipped. One afternoon, Emma spoke briefly to the mailman at the door, and that night her favorite painting was slashed across the middle, the canvas torn from corner to corner. Lillian claimed innocence, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Emma tried to ignore the unease growing in her chest. She told herself it was grief, trauma, anxiety. She had isolated herself. Of course things felt distorted. But then Carla showed up at her door. Emma opened it hesitantly. Carla looked worried and exhausted. "You haven't answered my texts in days," she said. "I was starting to think something happened." Emma forced a smile. "Sorry. I've just been busy painting." Carla stepped inside, glancing around the dim living room. "Listen," she said, her voice low. "I went back to the Historical Society. I found more on Lillian Bradbury." Emma tensed. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Carla said gently. "Emma, she's not who she says she is." Emma's jaw clenched. "You don't even know her." Carla held up an old, yellowed newspaper clipping. Lillian Bradbury did exist. She lived here. But she wasn't a victim of heartbreak. She was accused of murdering her sister. Emma blinked, stunned. "She was obsessed with her sister's fiancé," Carla continued. "When he ended things with Lillian, she lured her sister into the woods behind this house. Her sister was found buried beneath the old oak tree. Lillian claimed innocence, but she was mentally unraveling. Days later, she was found dead in the attic. Suicide. She poisoned herself." Emma stared at the article, her hands trembling. A grainy photo showed a much younger Lillian, recognizably the same woman she had been painting. "No, that's not what she told me." Carla stepped closer. "She's not just a ghost, Emma. She's manipulating you, feeding off your pain. She needs you to stay here, to keep her alive." Emma shook her head, backing away. "You're wrong. I'm not," Carla whispered. "And you have to leave. Tonight. Please." But when Emma turned toward the hallway, Lillian was already there. Not in physical form, but her voice. "Lies. All of it. She's jealous. She wants to take you from me." The attic light flicked on by itself. A cold wind whipped through the house, rattling windows and slamming a cabinet door shut. Carla gasped and grabbed Emma's hand. "Do you see what's happening? This isn't just a haunting, it's possession." Emma's head spun. Conflicting voices echoed through her mind, Carla's pleading, Lillian's sorrowful rage, her own heart thrashing in her chest. The house itself seemed to be pulsing, breathing, reacting. In the attic, her paintings began to fall one by one, crashing to the ground. A mirror shattered on its own. Her phone screen cracked without warning. "Don't listen to her," Lillian said, her voice suddenly desperate. "She'll make you leave, and then you'll be alone again. Like before." Emma clutched the stair rail, staring up toward the attic. The place she once felt peace now radiated dread. She turned to Carla. "I need time." "We don't have time," Carla said urgently. "She's too attached to you now. Every day you stay, she's getting stronger." Emma looked at the torn canvas, at the broken mirror, at the trembling light bulbs. And for the first time she felt it fully. The fear. Not the kind that prickles your skin, but the kind that wraps around your soul. She had believed in a ghost's grief. But now she was starting to understand the truth. She hadn't been comforting a lost soul. She had been feeding one. And now it didn't want to let her go. Emma didn't sleep that night. After Carla left, reluctantly and with a warning to call if anything happened, Emma locked all the doors and sat by the fireplace. The house creaked around her like it always did, but now every sound felt amplified, every flicker of shadow more threatening. The truth Carla had revealed looped in her mind. Lillian murdered her sister. She had invited something dangerous into her life. Not just a ghost, but a spirit warped by obsession, betrayal, and centuries of loneliness. Still, part of her didn't want to believe it. Lillian had seemed so fragile, so sorrowful. But by dawn, Emma's doubt began to decay. She had bruises on her arms finger-shaped. She hadn't fallen. She hadn't even left her bed. And she didn't remember going to sleep at all. When she looked in the mirror, her eyes seemed wrong. Not tired. Different. There was something distant in them, like she was peering out from behind herself. The attic door opened on its own that morning. It creaked slowly, with deliberate timing, as if beckoning. She climbed the steps like someone in a trance. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her paintings were strewn across the floor. Some were ripped. Others had changed. Faces twisted, mouths sewn shut, shadowy figures in the background she hadn't painted. And on the far wall, painted in thick, angry strokes, were words she didn't remember writing. "You are mine." Emma fell to her knees, shaking. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body wouldn't move. Behind her, Lillian appeared again. But she was no longer the mournful, elegant ghost Emma once knew. Her eyes were hollow, pitch black. Her form flickered between beauty and something skeletal, decomposing. Her voice layered, now one high and sorrowful, the other low, guttural, like it came from the bowels of the earth. "You promised," Lillian growled. I never did," Emma whispered. "I was helping you. You opened the door. You let me in. You said my name. You listened." Emma stood, her back pressed to the wall. I didn't know. I didn't know what you really were." Lillian floated closer, the temperature dropping until Emma's breath frosted. "You were perfect, Emma. Alone. Fractured. Just like me." Emma screamed and ran out of the attic, down the stairs, toward the front door. But it slammed shut on its own. Locked. Behind her, the radio turned on, blaring a static-filled waltz. The lights flickered. The temperature plummeted. And then her body began to move without her. Her feet stepped backward. Her hands reached out, painting in midair. Her mind was screaming no, but her body didn't listen. She was inside herself, but not alone. In the mirror across the hallway, she caught a glimpse of her reflection. It was smiling. But she wasn't. The next few days passed like a blur. She would lose time, minutes, sometimes hours. She'd wake up in the attic, paintbrush in hand, entire canvases finished in styles not her own. Her voicemail filled with Carla's concerned messages. Neighbors knocked, but she didn't answer. She couldn't. She was no longer fully in control. She'd begun seeing things, shadows and corners that moved too quickly. Her own face whispering things in the mirror. Her hands bruised and battered from nights she couldn't remember. One evening, she found herself standing in the backyard, barefoot, holding a shovel. Before her lay a patch of disturbed earth beneath the old oak tree. She dropped the shovel and ran back inside, locking the doors behind her. In her journal, a message was written in blood-red ink: "Help me finish what I started." Emma finally realized Lillian didn't want peace. She wanted a second chance. And she was using Emma's body to get it. The possession was nearly complete. If she didn't act soon, Emma knew she'd disappear entirely. Not die. Be replaced. Emma stood at the edge of herself. That's the only way she could describe it now. Her thoughts flickered like a dying bulb, her memories floated just out of reach, and her body felt like a borrowed shell. She would catch herself in mirrors and not recognize the person staring back. Her voice sometimes came out wrong, softer, more elegant, more Lillian. She was fading. The possession wasn't just spiritual, it was psychological. Lillian was overriding her. But somewhere deep inside, Emma still fought. That flicker of resistance sparked fully back to life when she listened to one of Carla's voicemails. "Emma. I went back again. I found her diary." Emma clutched her phone tightly, her body trembling. Lillian screamed in her ears, "Don't listen. She's lying." Carla's voice continued. "There's something in the oak tree. That's where she buried her sister. You have to destroy it. That's the tether, her anchor. If you burn what's left, it might be the only way to sever her connection to you." Emma rewound and replayed the message over and over, committing the words to memory. Burn what's left. Break the tether. That night, she made a decision. She would fight back. She waited until midnight, when Lillian was weakest, when her voice was quieter, like a fading echo. Emma lit a lantern, grabbed a spade, and walked barefoot into the backyard. The air was still. The stars were hidden behind thick clouds. Every step felt like walking through molasses. The old oak loomed like a watchful guardian, its twisted limbs reaching skyward. Emma hesitated only once before she began to dig. The soil was cold, heavy, as though resisting her. But she dug for hours, driven by desperation and a thundering pulse of terror in her chest. Finally, the spade hit something hard. A decayed wooden box, bound in rusted metal. She pulled it up with shaking hands. Inside were the remains of a small dress, an old hairbrush, and a lock of hair sealed in yellowed ribbon. The scent of roses suddenly filled the air. And then, you ungrateful little thing. Emma turned. Lillian was there, clearer than ever. Her form was no longer flickering. She looked solid. Real. Her eyes burned with betrayal. I gave you purpose. I gave you meaning, she hissed. You used me, Emma said, stepping back. You lied. You never wanted peace. I am peace, Lillian spat. Peace from loneliness. Peace from pain. We could have been whole together. Emma held up a lighter. Her hands trembled. No more lies. You won't survive this without me, Lillian warned. You'll go back to being nothing. Emma stared at the ghost and for the first time truly saw her. Not the tragic figure she once believed, but a hollow soul twisted by vengeance and obsession. A predator cloaked in sorrow. I'd rather be nothing than you. She lit the contents of the box. The flames caught quickly. The dress curled into ash. The lock of hair turned black. The ribbon melted into smoke. Lillian screamed. It was not human. The sound shattered the silence, cracked windows, and sent birds scattering from the trees. The air turned black around her, then red, then nothing at all. Emma fell to the ground, covering her ears as the ghost howled, her form splitting into smoke and flame and finally silence. The wind returned. The sky cleared. And Emma, muddy, shaking, exhausted, felt herself again. She cried for a long time. From relief. From grief. From fear that some part of Lillian might still linger in her bones. But inside her head there was only silence. For the first time in weeks she was alone. And it felt like freedom. The days after the burning felt unreal. Emma wandered through her home like a stranger. The air, once heavy with invisible weight, was still. Her paintings, those twisted, haunted images of Lillian, no longer made her chest tighten with dread. Some were wrecked, others untouched. She covered them with white sheets and turned the canvases to the wall. The attic no longer called to her. No creaking doors. No whispers. Just the sound of wind brushing against the eaves. Carla came by 2 days later, cautiously hopeful, half expecting the house to be empty or Emma to be lost to madness. But Emma greeted her at the door, tired, pale, but lucid. You look like yourself, Carla said gently. I feel like myself, Emma replied, then added after a pause. Or, at least I think I'm starting to. They sat together on the porch, warm mugs in their hands. The silence between them filled only by birdsong and the rustle of trees. Emma told her everything, what she remembered, what she didn't, what she felt even when she couldn't explain it. How did you survive it? Carla asked softly. I didn't, Emma said. Not fully. There's a version of me that never comes out of that attic. Carla didn't argue. She just placed a hand over hers and squeezed. Over the following weeks, Emma began cleaning the house. Not just physically, but spiritually. She saged every room, opened every window. Carla brought a priest and a medium, both skeptical but kind. Neither found any trace of Lillian. But Emma sometimes still saw her, in dreams, in flickers of reflection. Not as a threat anymore, just a shadow, a ghost left behind, without power or purpose. And slowly Emma painted again. Not haunted portraits or ghostly figures, but vivid, wild landscapes. Light bursting through trees. Waves crashing against jagged cliffs. Color. Life. The internet buzzed with praise. Her art has transformed, critics said. It's like she walked through fire and found herself on the other side. And in many ways, that was true. But Emma knew the cost. There were still bad days. Sometimes she'd wake up and forget what year it was. Sometimes she'd hear her name whispered in the wind and freeze. But she had a mirror now. A real one. And every time she looked, it was just her reflection. No one standing behind her. No voice echoing her thoughts. Just Emma. Alive. Whole. Free.